Well, hello everyone. This is Jonathan on Underpromoted, and today really excited to interview John Foley. John helps teachers use strategy games as educational tools. Typically on my channel, I have a lot of people in professional chess. It could be pro players or organizers, but this channel is also about sharing really interesting ideas. And so I had the chance to hear John speak this summer and really appreciated what he had to share. So I wanted to interview him. John's done a lot of different things. He's worked extensively and had leadership roles in organizations like the European Chess Union or Chess in Schools and Communities. But I think the easiest way to sum up what he does is this description of Chess Plus, where he's the director. And it goes Chess Plus is an educational consultancy which provides a new approach to applying strategy games in the classroom. We give precedence to educational goals and methods rather than mastering the game itself. Building upon feedback from thousands of learners, games are reduced down to their basic elements. We provide teachers and parents with tools and materials to introduce these games in a variety of interesting and exciting ways, and thus promote mathematical, logical, and creative skills, and ultimately metacognition. So, is there anything you would like to add to that, John?
Sounds like a pretty, comprehensive thumbnail as far as these things go. Yeah, sure. But maybe I could just say that apart from the chess role that you mentioned, I also had a life prior to chess.
That's right.
So
Yeah, as
we don't,
barrister
we
and
don't need to, we don't need to dwell on that. But I mean, I was involved in management consulting and law. So, I kind of, to some extent, reflect that one needs to be able to think analytically in management positions. And so I think that chess is certainly compatible with providing children with a kind of right set of thinking skills to assist them in their careers. And I think chess perhaps becomes more relevant over time as children will need to engage more with ways of thinking, being adaptable, being flexible in the future. That's the way the jobs market is going.
mhm. Yeah, I think that would be a good thing. We can talk, we'll talk a little bit about your career, how you got exposure to these different games and decided to go do this work. We can also talk a little bit about some of the research you've been a part of. So, as I was getting ready for this interview, I found this paper that John co authored, um, part of Erasmus Plus, which is the EU's educational and sporting initiative. So, I think to start, um, what makes a game a strategy game, and then why is it so helpful for kids to play those kinds of games?
A strategy game is, well, first of all, what's a game? I mean, a game is where you have a set of rules, a set of moves, and a winning objective. And what is special about a game, as opposed to, say, a puzzle, is that in a game, what your move does to some extent interferes or limits what your opponent can do, and vice versa. So you need to think not just about what your possibilities are, but about what your opponent's possibilities are. And so you're automatically drawn into a kind of if then else type of mode of thinking. And it's really quite fundamental to how we interact with other people in the world. We need to be able to uh, reflect on, what can I do? What is likely the reaction could be? Of course, it's not just other people. It could be, other processes, other activities going on. Um, but in essence, a game is about making a move and anticipating a reaction in such a way that you're trying to you're trying to, if you like, outsmart your opponent to achieve the winning objective. That's what makes games special. What a strategy game is where you kind of pare a game down to its essentials There are lots of board games. Board games very popular. I like board games. I was brought up playing board games. Um, but they generally speaking have elements of luck within them. So they're using dice, you're using cards and dice, and some other randomization factors. Whereas a strategy game is characterized by having no chance elements to it. We say there's no luck in a strategy game. It's all about your thought and your opponent's thought, and you're locking horns together, as it were, in a struggle to see who's going to come out on top. It's very primeval, it's very evolutionary, you could say. What characterizes the sort of strategy games that we're dealing with in education, and why I think they are suitable for education, is that they're the kind of the purest form of interactive thought. So let's call it gaming thought. I think people perhaps underestimate how important game theory is in life. So many things of what we do might be well represented as sort of game. Um, so, and we're all primed to play games. We all understand this mode of thinking. But what a strategy game does, it kind of pares it down to its essentials, small number of pieces, a small set of rules, simple to understand. But you have within that within that simplicity, you have complex alternatives. And if you look at the kind of, if I do this and they do that and I do this, you get into a kind of tree of possibilities. And this kind of structure is something that we face in any decision making. What sort of tree-like structure, um, how do we deal with this tree-like structure? What's the best way forward? And that is that analysis of variations is fundamental really to all decision making, all rational decision making. So we're giving children this. I say children, I mean, it can be with adults as well, but we're primarily talking about children here. We're giving them ways of thinking to be able to solve problems where those problems can be characterized as being a kind of sort of decision tree. But the reason why we need strategy games to do this and not the games of luck and chance is because what's vitally important in education is to be able to provide reasoning. You need to be able to say, why is that move a good move? Why is that move not such a good move? And for that, you need to be able to provide some argumentation. And argumentation doesn't really work if you're in a kind of chance situation. We're not, of course, there are probabilistic games. These can be very enjoyable, but they're not really ideal for education. In education, you have to be clear and simple. That's how we learn. Yes, later on you can complicate things up, but really at the level that you know, we're dealing with, which is, let's say, children start able to play games a bit more seriously from the ages about 7 or so onwards. And for that age range, we know that what works best is simple explanations, repetition, and practice. And if we can provide them with that, then they will grow in confidence and understanding of the games. So that's the general picture as to why I would recommend using strategy games
Mhm.
in it.
Yeah, and let me read. So the paper I mentioned earlier, there's 21 strategy games that are introduced in it. And I can read a brief excerpt that explains what those games have in common. Um, What they have in common is that their rules are simple enough that they can be learned within minutes and can therefore be played right away. Even young pupils are able to detect patterns and possible strategies. They can gain insights through play. They will experience the emergence of playing strategies and become better in the game. They will appreciate that thinking is fun and yields results. And I think many of the games actually map onto maybe an algorithm or a mathematical concept, which is quite interesting. And then one thing, so, we were talking about other games that are more complicated, but maybe not amenable to teaching. So, poker, that's an example of a high skill game where math is involved, but it's a very different type of thinking and explanation. And so, to try to explain to a child the probabilities of a certain hand, um, it doesn't really help teach in the same way that I think some of these games do. So, to talk about another strategy game, I think many people would consider chess to be the king of, or the ultimate strategy game. But one thing this paper talks about, and I've heard you explain, is reasons why chess has some shortcomings as an educational game. So, could you just touch a little bit about maybe reasons to not use chess or not use chess at first?
Yeah, I'm all in favor of chess. I enjoy chess. I was a successful junior chess player. I was London under 16 chess champion and Oxford University chess champion. So when I was young, I had certain playing ability. Um, and then I went into a career and I came back. And I volunteered to teach chess in a school, and I soon realized that when teaching, one needs to take a very different approach, and that my expertise at chess was not really particularly relevant because to teach chess, you only need a very, let's say, basic understanding of the game because it's not um, it's not really about conveying everything I know about the game. It's finding out where the children are and their level of understanding, and then trying to um, get them to understand certain concepts and then to learn for themselves and how to develop their play of the game. Um, Now, chess has had a tremendous upsurge in the last well, I'd say 20 years. And it's been taken on in schools across the world. There are many, many big chess projects in every continent. And there's this kind of there is some empirical research to the effect that chess can improve academic performance. This is particularly the case for children who are, we could say, underprivileged, that they don't have so much going for them at home. They don't get so many other kind of educational opportunities outside of the school, and we find that they're the ones who would benefit from chess if only they would have chess. But that isn't to say that that was the only way that they could have had that type of improvement through games. Um, and the issue with chess in schools is that um, it's really quite a serious adult game, if you like. It takes to play a game of chess under normal circumstances takes longer than the amount of times allocated for a chess lesson in a typical school timetable. So, if you go to a chess club, it's quite common for a game to take um 2 or 3 hours, whereas in a school environment, you would maybe have half an hour of time to dwell on a game, and it's therefore not possible to play regular forms of chess. That's one reason why we have versions of chess variants, say, and mini games which are quicker to play. So you get the benefits of chess without necessarily having the time deficit. Um, but it's but there are other more serious things about chess. One is who is going to teach the game, and what seems to have emerged in nearly every country where chess is taught in schools is that there are specialists who are chess tutors who are usually externally provided into the school. And so they are there just to teach chess. And if it's a big school with some significant resources, maybe they can put that person as a member of staff and they're kind of there regularly. And there are some schools like that, and the children would benefit from having kind of in-house chess tutoring. But in the majority of cases, the chess tutor is external to the school. They maybe go to one school, then another school, then another school. Um, and These tend to be chess players that they were chess enthusiasts that maybe became amateur or possibly semi-professional chess players, and they supplement their income by teaching. But the one of the problems with this is that the teaching that chess experts do is not really the same sort of teaching that teachers do. It's, when I say teachers, I'm talking about regular teachers who are teaching one of the core curriculum subjects, like English or mathematics. So a chess player will have a kind of automatic tendency to prefer to teach children who are talented at chess. I mean, that's where that's where their interest lies, and it's always wonderful to come across a child who's talented at chess. You come develop that child, maybe that child goes in competitions and so forth, and we can all be pleased at that, and that's fine. If it were a kind of chess school, and maybe a chess academy which takes place um, on an extracurricular basis after school at weekends and so on. But from an educational point of view, what school principals are interested in is the totality of children, what all the children are going to do. Now, if you're going to have a chess tutor who's primarily interested in the talented kids, we could call them that, at least talented in chess, then what's going to happen to the others? So we then say, well, okay, they they can do something else during the chess lesson. Maybe they can play other games, or they can occupy themselves in some way. But that's not really what it's not really what we're looking for during a chess session. We're looking for greater engagement, really. Um, so what uh, what can what can we do about this? Well, if we make chess voluntary, then maybe only a small proportion of children show up. That's okay. I mean, it's like if you have a music lesson. I mean, I learned the trumpet at school. We were called out to play our musical instruments from when the music teachers came around, and that's how it worked. Maybe it could be done with chess. But insofar as chess is going to be some sort of class exercise, then you'd need to somehow identify those children who might be interested in chess. And it does, I think, can work as a class exercise, albeit you might have to be a little bit selective or ask for volunteers as who would be involved in that class. So 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 just to summarize so far, the first issue is the amount of time a game takes. The second issue is that the type of teaching that takes place is rather specialized, and it doesn't appeal to most children. They're not really engaged by it. Um, the answer, I think, to these kind of twin problems is to actually say, look, what works is games, and what we need is for these to be taught by like regular teachers rather just than by external games experts. um, particularly if they are chess players, then they are very much, you know, expert in a very narrow field. So the broad uh, message I would have, and what my kind of my mission is to try and switch the debate from teaching chess in schools to teaching games in schools, and that the teaching should be actually integrated within the school and not something which is automatically assumed to come from outside by some sort of external experts. So that's the general picture. So the important aspect of this is that games would be actually then fully recognized as being a proper part of education. It strikes me as somewhat a huge gap in education that games are not included. There are so many, if we take sport, I mean, sport is included, I think, in every school. Um, and children enjoy sport, and sport is, what it's part of life. And millions, well, let's say a high proportion of the population enjoys watching sports and participating in sports, and it's regarded as kind of part of the educational experience to engage in sports. Um, and but by contrast, games are not so well regarded, and one has to consider, well, why is that the case? Why do we incorporate sports within our educational framework, but not games? I mean, games are sometimes included as a kind of um, a measure to fill time when the weather is inclement or something like this. So, okay, children, we're going to play, some board games here. Um, it tends not to be successful because it's not systematic, and I think this is the key. I believe that the reason that games are not taught in school is that people didn't know how to teach games, and they didn't know how to teach games because um, there's been the educational authorities have never thought that games were that important. Um, so it's a kind of partly, chicken and egg, but it's also because games are associated with fun. And actually, I think that this is a sort of a misunderstanding in a way, because I think games are serious. There's a whole category of games called serious game. I think games are serious. I take games very seriously, and I should hope that children playing games have a great deal of fun. I think it's not incompatible to have both of those objectives. Um, yeah, if one talks about, let's say, mathematics, one doesn't immediately think that children are having a lot of fun when they're doing, um, calculating the area of a triangle. It doesn't seem the most fun thing to do. But it's an important step in their understanding of geometry. But it's just so happens that games are fun. There is a kind of a game flow experience which which children enjoy. You can tell when they walk into a classroom and it's set up for games, they're absolutely thrilled. They just can't wait to get started. They don't really want to listen to the teacher. They just want to start playing. It's a very, very natural um, activity that young creatures want to play, because it's not just human. If you look at puppies, um, if you look at kittens, they want to play. All, young deer, I see them in the park. They're just playing about. So it plays an important part of human nature, and not only human nature, but nature. So why do we not take play seriously? So yes, children have fun, but that's partly because it's a natural thing to do, and they enjoy the experience of playing. Um, but the issue for the education authorities historically, I think, has been that there isn't an obvious way to teach games, and I think we've now discovered that perhaps there is a way to teach games, and it may have been that chess was the route by which we discovered how to teach games, because so much effort has been put into chess over so many decades, that we've now reached a stage that actually let's take what we've learned from teaching chess and now apply it to games more generally, and we can make a lot more progress than we have. We'd say thank you very much, chess, for having blazoned the way, and now we're going to start again, but this time focus primarily on the games that have some important characteristics where chess is deficient. So in particular, we have got this time aspect. So we're talking about games that don't take very long. They're quick to learn and they're quick to play. So and secondly, that they can be taught in the school by a teacher. So one of the reasons teachers were quite reluctant to teach games is they felt somewhat inadequate. What happens if the child is better than the teacher? What happens if the child beats the teacher? Um, what happens if the teacher cannot answer the question, what is the best move to play in this position? So all of these would be embarrassments in the world of chess, because one of the extraordinary things about chess is that a 10-year-old can beat a world champion. It's like age doesn't really matter. It's somehow some sort of mental process whereby you can get some prodigious performance at a very young age with very little practice. So some people's minds are almost geared up for games and for chess. But on the whole, um, I would argue that playing games, these strategy games, gives the same benefit in terms of academic outcome as with chess. So that if you were to, um, and should be done perhaps, have a randomized controlled trial whereby you have some children playing chess according to some curriculum, some children playing strategy games, perhaps again to some sort of curriculum, and then other children who are playing neither, but maybe engaged in some other creative activity, and then were to compare the results. Um, I suspect, or my hypothesis is that there would be no significant difference in the outcome between the strategy games and the chess, um, and that they would both give a more positive outcome than the ones who were not playing either of those two games. Except in one regard, which is that you would get a lot more children engaged if it was strategy games than if it was just chess. And and the reason is that it's just simpler, more accessible, and the teachers would be involved. That's the theory behind it. I've probably answered I've probably answered your question there.
Yes, you have. And let me just maybe I can draw out in summary a few of those points. I mean, first, of course, I mean, John and I, we are both chess players. That's how we met, is because of the chess connection. And so John's not saying that chess isn't a great game. I find sometimes chess players, especially accomplished chess players, take issue that chess with your thesis. But I think the point is, chess is a great game, but it may not be the best educational game. And I think I've experienced this where I've tried to teach someone about chess, and you find even explaining the win condition, what makes a checkmate, is quite complicated. And if you're teaching all the students, not just the ones who like playing board games, but even people who have no interest playing board games, that's quite a challenge. And on top of that, at a certain point, I mean, to be proficient in chess, you have to have tactical vision, but that is not really translatable, like with knights and bishops, to many other games in terms of the basic strategy or the sequence of logical thought. Um, so I think we can maybe transition and talk about some of the qualities of the games, the strategy games that you're suggesting as an alternative. And so I don't know if you remember discussing all these concepts, but let me read a few of the characteristics of a good game. So there are some of the ones that are listed are depth, clarity, drama, decisiveness, and simplicity. Um, the ring a bell.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's this multi-dimensional representation of strategy games, I think is extremely helpful. This was developed by some colleagues in Portugal, and if I just pick out one of these parameters, which is drama. Now, uh, maybe people don't think that there's much drama going on, and I'll come back to chess now in a game of chess, but it's a tremendously dramatic game. It's felt internally. People put a lot of mental effort and emotional effort into playing a game of chess, and their perception, if you play a game of chess, as to whether they're winning the game, losing the game, or whether it's somehow in some sort of dynamic balance, or it's just unclear. That is at the heart of how people perceive games, and it reflects their feeling. And uh, it's extraordinary number of people who give up chess because they get too nervous to play the game. They can't handle it. Um, they they dislike defeat. They can't handle pressure. Games are played in practice using clocks, game timers, which means that you don't have an indefinite amount of time to play. You're always making a decision with the time constraint. So you have to be very precise in how you allocate your time if you want to be optimal in some way. You have to think about what the important things are to think about. That is a great discipline, um, and it's I think it's a great it's great for life because you have to be decisive. In the end, you have to be decisive. But drama in the context of kind of definition of games has got to do with the the advantage of switching from one side to the other side. And you play a move which is slightly inaccurate. Let's say it's a rook ending, and you move your rook to one square. But had you moved the square to the one square next to that, it would have been a winning position. But the fact you move it to where you have done, it's a losing condition. Now, um, this is sometimes if there's an audience there, let's say the typical situation, it's a match going on, it's on board one, two top players there. They have they've got down to a very limited amount of time. They're playing quickly, and the audience is there, and the audience uh, is not so nerve-wracked as the players are. So they're able to see what's going on. And sometimes you can sense from the audience what how they feel that the advantage has shifted from one side to the other. And um, chess lends itself to that very well because it's a complex game, and very often you can tell whether you're winning or losing, or whether a move was a good or bad move. This can be contrasted with some other games, um, in which the once one side has an advantage, there's really no chance for the other side, and uh, it's it's important if we can identify the dramatic aspect in a game. I mean, chess is really, I think, exceptional in the amount of drama that's involved in the game. it came out in that Netflix series, The Queen's Gambit. You saw that there was some sort of tension and drama all the time in that. And I thought that they did a very good job in showing that in that series. Um, but if you played some of the simple, if we take a very simple strategy game called say Fox and Hounds, it's four pieces versus one piece. I would say it's a very low drama type of game, very low drama, but it has other saving characteristics which make it work. But one of the reasons I think that chess has succeeded as a game is because it is for the players, it is high drama. You come if you want to feel a sense of satisfaction from having won a game of chess, or from perhaps more generally from having done anything in life, you must have faced a challenge. And uh, that if I just refer to the definition by Bernard Suits of a game, philosophical definition of a game, it's and I paraphrase uh, the creation of unnecessary obstacles in order to enjoy the experience of overcoming those obstacles. So it's nothing's achieved without suffering, if I could put it in a more kind of religious context. But you know, I think that drama is part of our experience with emotion, games can deliver that to us as well. And I think it's much more clear when you're talking about sport. Sport is only, I think it's successful because I mean, and all sports that are successful are designed and fine-tuned in such a ways that they can produce drama. I mean, that's what sport gives us. It gives us drama. And as the advantage swings from one side to the other, and then perhaps a few false moves, and the game is lost. Maintaining drama is what makes sport very special. In games, it's not as fast moving as as sport, but we do have the drama normally experienced internally. But if there are spectators who understand the game, then they can experience it as well. And I think actually one of the interesting aspects of modern chess online is that there's been the rise of the commentator. Um, you know, Commentators who kind of bring games alive, and the late lamented Naroditsky was famous for his ability to kind of engage with the viewers on on chess games. So it's people who understand games and can communicate the drama. I think that really is important. So when we're talking about games, just again to summarize, there are multiple characteristics of a game that would make it a successful game, and game designers are very aware of these things. Fun is only one part of the game, but people tend not to think of all these other dimensions, which are so important to the um, success of a game and the enjoyment of a game.
Yeah, so you talked about drama. I can just quickly maybe give some color on the other ones. So depth, how many times? Maybe a simple way to put it is how replayable is a game like tic tac toe. Once you played it a few times, you know that you can always play this strategy. Um, Clarity is another one. Is in a game where there's maybe a lot of potentials or options to calculate, it's harder to come up with a strategy because it's hard to wrap your mind around or see all the different possibilities.
Well, clarity has also, well, there's this issue about knowing who's winning or who is losing. There are some games you can play that it's not clear who's winning or losing until towards the end of the game. And whilst the players are happy to have won or lost, maybe it's not quite so engaging, the fact that they don't know how they're doing during the game. And this is one of the uh you know the issues that if you're dealing with a game like let's say Amazon's, it's not quite so clear what's going on. And an even worse example you could say is Lines of Action, a famously obscure game as to who's winning. And so these are playable on a chessboard. I'm not going beyond the chessboard for these examples. And it's just you you've got all the characters. You know what the move, what the you can define the moves, um, the rules of play, and the winning condition, but it doesn't make for a good game unless these other elements are in place. And some people are able to tolerate this kind of lack of clarity as to what's going on better than other people. And so you get sort of, as it were, cult followings from certain games because the people playing it have a better handle on whether they're winning or not. In chess, as at least you can see who's ahead of material, who's captured more material. It's obviously harder to assess things like space and initiative, but that should be brought into the and the strength of the pawn formation and so on. And that's you get more advanced aspects of it. But at some basic level, you can say who's ahead, at least in material. And I think that makes it more comfortable in terms of clarity when it comes to chess.
Yeah, and the two games John mentioned, Amazons and Lines of Action, I think they're both included in that paper. And I would encourage, I mean, anyone who's listening, whether you're just interested in the topic or you have, you're around kids and you want to teach them, or even if you like chess, but you want to play some other strategy games with your friends who don't play chess, it's a really interesting paper. It's relatively straightforward and easy to read. And there's a lot of games and also game analysis in it. So I'll post the link with this interview. So I think moving away from the games now, just um, on our last topic, how did you first encounter all these strategy games, not only chess, but the other ones? And then how did you decide from your career, being a barrister, working at PwC as a consultant, how did you decide that this is the work that you wanted to work on?
Well, that's that's quite a big question. Because I don't necessarily remember how I came up with particular games, but perhaps it might be worthwhile just setting out something about my own kind of intellectual background. So I studied philosophy at university, and that gave me a sense of the importance of argument, the importance of reasoning, and being able to explain things. This is, I think, central to education, giving people the ability to think things through for themselves. And then I went on to study and indeed work in the field called operational research, which is the application of mathematics to decision making, to kind of put it simply. And so I was using concepts like optimization. I was building computer models of how oil refineries work, or how electricity supply systems work, and so on. And if you're working in the field of modeling, how you're kind of you're getting very what I would call essentialist perspective on how the world works or how the aspect of the world works. And so you build a model, and the funny thing is that a lot of people who play games are also very good at modeling. So they're able to represent some aspect of how the world works in a mathematical way, by which I mean, for example, just lines of code or maybe lines on a spreadsheet, which perform a calculation. Um, and then you get into like you tweak one of the parameters to see if you can maybe produce oil more efficiently. Maybe you should take the oil, buy oil from this particular source, and then process it in this particular refinery, and then sell it in this particular market. So you're starting to tweak the different parameters, and at the same time, you're maybe dealing with other people who are like we would be, let's say, dealing with different clients. They're trying to come up with some sort of compromise arrangement. So therefore, you've got a kind of a mini world that you're dealing with, and you're trying to kind of come up with some maybe a compromise agreement. Maybe you're coming up with some sort of efficient state where you allocate the benefits and the costs of different parties. When you're doing that for a while, it feels very game-like. It feels like the sort of thinking is like you look at the analysis variations, you change the parameters, you begin to understand the the kind of what would happen if you did something becomes almost intuitive. So I think that, and I've spoken to other people who were involved in the operation research and who happened to play chess, and they were, of a similar mindset. It's easy. There's a big overlapping mindset between, mathematics, computer science, games, game theory. It's kind of almost an art, and dare I say, artificial intelligence. It's something of a continuum. And I mean, just if I may say, in relation to games, referring to the guy who is head of Google DeepMind, which is to say Google's artificial intelligence kind of unit based in London, Demis Hassabis, who received the Nobel Prize for chemistry last year. Now, for folding proteins and so on. Now, Demis Hassabis, he studied mathematics at Cambridge, and he was as a junior an international master. He's a very strong chess player as well. He set up games company. He wrote software, very successful, I think, when he's very young as well. And he then decided to switch career. He did a PhD in cognitive psychology in London and UCL, and he then worked on processes which eventually became part of deep learning, working with the deep learning guys, and amazed everybody with what he did in terms of being able to solve games using concepts from deep learning without having to explicitly explain how the games work, so that the AI was learning how to play the game just from watching it. So that was all very mind-blowing. But moving on from that, he has uh, developed the whole field, in a kind of epoch-making way. But I just want to make one point, is that Demis Hassabis was extremely good at strategy games, and the Mind Sports Olympiad, he won it. I can't remember how many times, but like 6 times in a row. The champion of champions as well. He won some more games than anybody else in these fields. So I think there's this mindset of science and computation and chess. I think it's somehow in interconnected. So um, if one then, so if we come back to your question, having um, diverted to a very high level indeed, and come back down to my level, um, I I've always been interested in games. I played lots of games like bridge. I was very keen on bridge and Monopoly, Risk, um, and I played them at some sort of competitive level. And what I felt with chess was that uh, when I was teaching children chess, I realized it was, I mean, what it wouldn't work to teach them actual chess. So I had to simplify it. So I knew, I think from general reading that, and Fox and Hounds have been for a long time. I think Fox and Hounds was the breakthrough game in a way, excuse me, because I would define it as the game which has got um it's the minimum configuration to have a non-trivial degree of complexity to make it worthwhile playing the game.
Yeah, it's
So
5 pieces on a chessboard, right?
yeah, exactly. Four versus one. That if you had four versus four, that would be more complex. But one versus one is maybe too simple. So, and 8 by 8 chess, partly eight, because an 8 by 8 grid is uh ubiquitous. And so let's find a game which works on 8 by 8. Okay, you could have 5 by 5 or something, but let's say work on 8 by 8. So I think it's worthwhile. But I found that I've continued to mm, develop new games uh by means that I think perhaps haven't been so open to people in the past. So, I mean, first of all, I mean, there are obviously a lot of professional game designers, and there are Essen in Germany has got, annual kind of game convention that's very active in promoting new games and innovation, and it's all fantastic. Um, and there's category of you call modern games and these kind of Essen games and so on. There's all great stuff. But I think there's another strand, the one I'm involved with, which is games that emerge from teaching. And so I I'll give you an example of a game I recently um I don't know if the right word is discovered, um, but I think I first showed it in public in Washington at that event that we participated in Alexandria. And it's called I call it progressive capture. And this this game it has the element of progressive, which is to say white makes one move, black makes two moves, white makes three moves, white makes four moves, black makes four moves, and so forth on the one hand. And on the other hand, you've got to capture all of your opponent's pieces. And capturing all of your opponent's pieces is a little bit like the game called Loser's Chess, which is a standard favorite in the classroom because chess tutors need to have games that don't take too long. And because Loser's Chess, where you obliged to take any piece that's available, um, is a game with mandatory moves. So forced moves means that
Faster.
you have to think so long, so it goes by very quickly. But one characteristic of it is you capture all the opponent's pieces. Now, what happens when you give games to children is they get mixed up. So there's a game called progressive chess where you can try and get checkmate using the rules one, two, three, four. Um, but you're still trying to get checkmate. So it's still it's a chess variant because that's to say you start with all the same starting pieces, but the rules are somewhat different in respect of how many moves you can make on your turn. So there's that, and then there's kind of the loser's chess idea. Um, so inevitably, what happens is children get mixed up, and they try and do progressive chess and loser's chess at the same time. And so this is great for me because I'm observing. I don't stop any of this stuff. I mean, I love children inventing stuff. They don't explicitly do it. They just perhaps naturally create some sort of they confound ideas and compound ideas. And so I then take that and I kind of refine it further. So This has now become, I think, quite a nice game to be played, and I use it all the time because it has the characteristics I need, which is it doesn't take too long, but it still has some merit in terms of explaining certain moves. And in order for it not to take too short a time, the game, because if you get a pawn through the other end, you can promote. I had to introduce the notion, long abandoned in regular chess, is that promotion is file dependent. So if you get a knight's pawn, a pawn through to the knight square, it's promoted to a knight rather than, uh, typically a queen in regular chess. So that dampening down helps a lot in the design of that game. And also, and it came about partly because I just play lots of games with children, it's that I've always liked the idea of a flourish at the end of a game. You're talking about drama, right? So one way of introducing drama to a game is through a flourish. The flourish will be that you the king must be the last piece to be captured. So there's no point capturing king earlier. So unlike loser chess, but the king's last piece to be captured. But also it must be captured on your final move of the sequence. So if you've got let's say a 9 move sequence, you've got to go move, 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 capture, 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 capture. And then the final capture is of the king. So you can do that with a flourish, kind of slam the piece down and wave your arms. You've won the game. So I think that that is by design. It kind of emerged from an amalgam of previous games. It was then kind of put through the testing in the classroom, and then it was refined so as to reintroduce some of these elements that are important in a classroom form of the game. So that was to say, there's certain rules that are there really just to make it a bit of a challenge for the children. If you just capture all of the opponent's pieces, then that's a bit too simple. So we say, well, it has to be the king last, and then you can't promote too easily. You've got to be, file promotion, and then you've got to have this flourish thing, and that means that uh, you can have a conversation about, let's say you're on the final move, and you say to the child, okay, you've got 9 moves now. How are you going to win? In what sequence should you be capturing the remaining pieces in order to end up such that you can capture the king on the final move? Now that is, a very well-defined problem. There might be only a small number of solutions to that, but it's exactly what you want when you're a game teacher. You want to set up the situation where it's perhaps a unique position each time, but there is a specific challenge, and you can use a certain way of thinking about it. And that I think is much more amenable for teachers in the classroom. And that's difficult to do in regular chess. I mean, regular chess, you could have these nice positions, for example, some endgame positions, but that takes time to set up and sometimes they're a bit difficult. And it's not, and what you don't get then with those kind of endgame exercises or chess studies, you don't get flow. And what you need, one of the other characteristics of game is flow, game flow. You need to have a sense of you're making progress, that you kind of, and then finally you do the flourish. You don't, so that is so important as compared to just say setting some sort of standard exercises, as you might do in mathematics when you get children to multiply 3-digit numbers in long arrays, hour by hour, which is what we used to do. Maybe they've done different things now, but so I mean, that gives you an insight into, I think it's an evolving area of education. I think the whole area of strategy games and teaching through games is, is getting to the stage that, education authorities ought to start taking it seriously.
Is there anything we haven't mentioned that you'd want to touch on or just say? Any work you're doing or any philosophy on games or anything else? Any encouragement to the audience?
couple of things, I suppose. One is how to implement this. I mean, the work we did for the European Union and the Erasmus program, in order to implement these games, we felt we needed to develop some software. Hence, the logic board was created. The logic board with a Q, and that's kind of designed just to be able to kind of portray the positions primarily. You can play games with it as well, but it's really about kind of being able to show positions, and that's quite it. I think that was important to promote these things further. The other thing is that if one is interested in not just rationality, which is philosophy of games is all about rationality. I think a very important element that we haven't dealt with in strategy games, but I think is very important, is the area of missing information or games of imperfect information. And I don't think that and it is often claimed that chess helps with critical thinking. I would say chess helps with logical thinking for sure, but I don't think it goes far enough when it comes to critical thinking, because critical thinking, as I would understand it, embraces situations where there is missing information, right? And I think it's worthwhile pointing this out because so much of the challenge of the young people today when they are uh, browsing the internet, looking at social media and so on, is to figure out what to believe, who to trust. And a lot of that is down to understanding kind of the hidden assumptions behind things, what am I not being told? And I think this is the one aspect of the strategy games. I've actually only spoken about strategy games of perfect information, actually, but there is another category of games of imperfect information. We don't know everything. Something is missing, and it so happens that one category of games where that is dealt with quite well is in card games, and bridge and poker being two ideal card games. And so I would strongly advocate for that. Start with strategy games, but then also add card games into the mix later on. I think bridge is a wonderful game, and you can play forms of it like mini bridge, which I think are excellent starters. Um, I would just the caution with poker is that I think poker is great for developing probabilistic reasoning, but I think its association with gambling is essentially damages its reputation. So I personally have played poker with children. They very much enjoyed it. They just say we didn't play for money, but I think that one must realize that some games can be very educational, and the, so I think this is, if you like, in a secondary school, not in the primary school, as we would call it in England. That's the direction that they were going. So there would be my two um provisos to you about what I was saying, that use some software, because but and then think about games of perfect information. It's still very, very complicated, but the real world is about missing information, and about hidden information, and indeed false information. But that's a different thing altogether, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, thanks, John. I really appreciate your time. This has been really interesting. It's very refreshing to hear these new ideas, and I hope people feel encouraged to check out these games, your work, Logic Board, all those things.
Great. Okay. Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Jonathan, for the opportunity, and let's keep in touch.